What's up gamers, DreamcastGuy here reviewing today Final Fantasy XV Royal Edition. Square Enix's constantly growing and evolving RPG is back once again, and this re-release has a lot to talk about. What you're getting here is the original game with all the updated patches that make it a lot more playable, all the DLC including the individual episodes of each of the characters, all of the multiplayer which was the Comrades DLC, and now some all new stuff which is part of the Royal Edition pack. I have to say, this game right up front is really good. If you have never played Final Fantasy XV before and you've kept saying to yourself, I'll wait till it's complete, honestly, I think that this is about as done as it's going to get. They've introduced so many new cutscenes that make the story a lot more smooth, and the ability to actually play with each of the individual characters thanks to these patches is phenomenal. But on top of that, I have to say, I love the changes that they've made with this latest pack. This DLC really focuses on the ended chapters, giving us more bosses to fight that are incredibly powerful and more stuff to do. One of the things that's being introduced in the Royal Pack is the ability to actually drive the boat. Now this is a small thing, but I feel like it really sums up what they're trying to do with Final Fantasy XV now, which is just give us more options on how we want to play. So the Royal Vessel is something that's actually parked outside each of the major cities that have a port, and it makes it where you can now drive around the ocean, go fishing, and do some little side quests that are mostly just photo related. It's something that's really tiny, but it's a nice little touch. The major thing that's being introduced here, though, is the new expanded map of Insomnia City. So I'm going to avoid any spoilers here, but I do want to show you some stuff. The game, of course, ends back at Insomnia, which at this point is completely destroyed. The ruins originally, though, were incredibly tiny. You basically walked in a straight line to the last boss, which was so aggravating. That was the #1 complaint of a lot of gamers, was the fact that you're basically just being put on rails to go fight one guy and then see the ending credits. This is no longer the case. Now they've actually put in tons of quest givers and put in all sorts of extra enemies throughout this area. Along with that, there's all sorts of little new nooks and crannies. You can really explore the entire map now, and what's really cool about this is that there's all sorts of little details and extra little pieces of lore, including newly introduced cutscenes. It makes it where this is clearly the home of Noctis. We're seeing more about this incredibly important piece of the story. It's no longer just a tiny little footnote like we're rushing towards that ending movie. What's extra cool about this is if you do the quests here, you'll actually run into your custom character that you made in the Comrades DLC multiplayer. This is the actual guy I made. This character's name is DreamcastGuy. So the fact that I can actually team up with him for a particular mission and fight a bunch of enemies is incredibly cool, and it feels like it finally brings everything together. I always hated that the DLC always felt so standalone. Each of these characters is going on their own little mission, but they don't really talk about it again. Now everything finally feels completely cohesive. To make you feel driven to stay in this new place, there's also a ton of extra new bosses. I'm going to try and avoid showing clips of these guys that are too long because really they're very surprising big encounters. These new enemies are really smart. Like for example, there are now these 3 bosses in a row that you fight before the main big bad boss. Now these guys are called the Rulers of Yore, and it seems like they're previous kings of the city that have actually been taken over. And what's really cool is each one of them has a completely different fighting style. Like one guy is a giant dude with a sword and shield who will pull you in with gravity. There's this person called the Rogue who can turn invisible and will do sneak attacks, meaning that you need to constantly switch characters to avoid ever just being caught in a corner. And there's also this dude who is just absolutely a powerhouse. The final guy, he can do these giant tornadoes that literally one-shot you if you're not actually staying on the move. This is so cool because I feel like each one of these enemies is based around actually improving your skills. I am level 100 with all my characters, and I still was getting my butt kicked if I was trying to be lazy. One of the biggest things that I know a lot of people have said was that the combat was a little bit too simplistic in Final Fantasy XV, and now I finally feel like we're getting the challenge we deserve, something that's going to push you to try and get better. If you're trying to make these massive new bosses a lot easier, well, there is a way to do that. If you do all the side quests in the main story, you can collect each of the royal arms. There are 13 in total, and I collected them just for fun, even though they weren't really trophy related. There is now a new item though called the Armiger Unleashed. This basically makes it where now your special attack isn't just some quick little strike, it's an ultimate super attack that demolishes enemies. It basically makes it where if you're somebody who's having trouble with these ending fights, especially stuff like Cerberus or the ultimate weapon, you now have an extra way to try and arm yourself for these encounters. I enjoyed so much of this because I feel like they're trying to just answer the complaints of the players, to try and make Final Fantasy XV the game it probably should have been at the beginning. This has finally come together to be a game that, in my opinion, fits into the series amazingly. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, and the thing that really kind of gets me the most excited about this DLC, is there's all these new bits of storyline that are actually hidden all throughout the world. This is called the Archives, and it makes it where, scattered throughout the lands, there are now new local myths and little extra spots that you can discover, typically in the form of books and stuff. It really gives a way to finally obtain more information about this rather mysterious world. I've always had so many questions about Final Fantasy XV because I feel like they never fully explain some stuff about the gods, the kings, and about all the wars that have taken place. We're finally getting that extra deep dive that I feel like other Final Fantasies have done so brilliantly. It's like the writers are finally being able to give us the explanation and world that we actually deserve. I like so much about this DLC and the Royal Edition as a whole, but I have to say, it's still not quite worth the price. So if you've already bought Final Fantasy XV at this point, then you probably bought the $20 season pass to get all the original episodes. You probably played the DLC multiplayer. At this point, that means you've spent $80 on this game. $80 for that game so far. This new content is an additional $15 on top of that, which means that if you've bought each piece of this as it's come out individually, that really means that you're paying nearly $100 just to try and go on this adventure. Now, I do think that the Royal Edition pack is interesting if you haven't played through this before. However, paying $15 for a little bit of extra plot and some really cool bosses seems pretty steep, and I'm saying that as somebody who actually really enjoys this stuff. I think that it needs to probably go on sale or hopefully have the price reduced to just the tiniest bit. I managed to get through all this content in about 3 to 4 hours. It's not really that in-depth, and stuff like being able to drive the boat in circles isn't really something that's super appealing. Okay, so we've heard some good and some bad, but let's over the ratings board and put a big number on it. I am giving the Final Fantasy XV Royal Edition a 9 out of 10. While I do have some complaints about the pricing, there's no denying that this is now the definitive version of this game. You should definitely check this out if you haven't already. I'm really glad that they finally brought this together to make it into what it should have been in the first place. This is now a proper Final Fantasy, and one that I'm going to proudly put on my shelf. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. This has been DreamcastGuy with another review. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. I didn't mention this, but they've also introduced a new first-person mode. Don't turn that on. Holy crap, does it freaking give you an awful headache. Do not turn that on. Other than that, Super awesome. Oh, hey, I was just playing a little bit of Grand Theft Auto on my Darth Vader PSP. Are you curious what I'm going to come out with next? Well, if you click this button, you'll be subscribed to be the first to know. Also, if you click over here and here, you can see my latest review and my latest top 10. I promise, it was super good. Or it was really bad and I'm sure you can just make fun of me in the comments. Either way, it'll be a lot of fun. Thanks so much for watching.